Hey, so we all know with samplers we need some way to capture our samples and get it on the device, but the Polyend Tracker Mini actually has a nice little microphone inbuilt for us so we can actually go around and capture our samples. So I thought in this video I'm going to show 5 of my tips on not only just use the microphone to capture samples, but some of the ways I actually capture and construct samples for the Polyend Tracker and Tracker Mini to get them working as best as I can. So let's get straight into this one. Alright, I'm here with the Polyend Tracker, and really today is about talking about how to use the microphone and what sort of samples we can use to get some really cool things happening inside this machine. Now I've got the Tracker Mini in front of me because it's got this little microphone here, and this is a video for both the Tracker Mini and the OG. So if you're looking to record samples with the OG, I would recommend some sort of little pencil shotgun microphone. This is the Rode Video Mic Go. This is how I used to connect samples because it's got a little 3.5 jack here. It's quite easy to plug in and then face it to where the sound source is. And really, I do have a bigger version, my NTG, which I use for my voiceovers. But really, with the Tracker Mini or Tracker, it's just a really nice way to capture samples. So the first tip is really how to actually capture samples. So if we go into the sample recorder, you can see it's already working, and I've got the gain set up quite high. So if I bump that right up, you're going to hear a doubling effect. A little weird, but it just want to go over like how do we actually capture a sound. So sort of like some of the ideas, because we've got this volume bar, we've got gain, and how does it work. So with sound itself, it's sort of directional in a way. So if I put the tracker here, the way sound works, so if I click my fingers really close, see how the spikes up here, but if I click further away, see how it doesn't spike as much. So what we need to do is to be able to get really close to the sound source, as well as have a gain that's nice enough to be able to capture a really good quality sound. So I'm just going to, for example, my voice, we'll bump it up a little bit. As it starts going to yellow, I try and keep it away from there, so probably a little bit further back, and I'm just going to hit record. So something like this is actually really good. I can see the waveform happening, and yeah, I would say I'll take that and do a bit of normalization to that to bump up the sound quality. But I do recommend recording a lot quieter than actually trying to record at the top level, because sometimes when it happens, like I'll bump up the gain, I'm just going to speak now. You can see it's really getting high, but it's going to start clipping. So this sort of stuff here, if you have that in your sample, it does sound very abrasive, and it's a lot easier to be a little bit less and bump up the sound level versus having that and having to record it again. So that's really tip number 1 on how to capture a sample. So we've got our way of capturing samples, but what are the sounds that we're looking for? And with sound itself, there's sort of like 2 parts to it. So you got the thing that can make the sound. So I've just got a bit of a jam jar here, but then we have the thing that excites the sound. And when those 2 things come together, it makes a sound. But there's different ways that those sounds interact. So that was a different sound. And what I'm really wanting to do for tip number 2 is to be unconventional with your sound design. And yeah, it's sort of a buzzword, but what I'm talking about is like finding those nuances and exploring sound itself. Like I've taken the Polyend Tracker Mini into a lot of spaces. Like I do like taking it into the garage because I've got a whole bunch of things that I can have and whack with, and yeah, it just a whole bunch of sound design possibilities. But I think what I'm trying to say is like, what are some of the nuances that I'm looking at? Because like, say if I, like that's a sound, but so there's little quiet sounds that are really interesting. So if I just do, like if I was to take that in and start listening to like that sort of like quieter part of the section, there's a lot of nuance in there. So I find them really useful when I'm doing like sound design elements. The next part I'm listening to is the transient of the sound. So that's like the initial spike that here when you hit. So if I was to like hit it like, it's got a ding, but if I mute it a little bit, it's more of a thud. If I lift it up with my whole hand cupped, it's more of a tap. And those little spikes have a lot of information I can pull in. Like if I was working on the Polyend Tracker, I actually cut that out as like a little single cycle waveform, and I can treat that like a synthesizer. And those three sounds I just collected then would be three completely different sounding oscillators. So those are the sort of things I'm listening for when I'm in a space. It's like tap, tap, oh, that one's a bit different, so I'll keep that one as unique. And yeah, it's just really exploring. And the last part about being unconventional is, like, I feel you do get caught up like, oh, I really want a drum sound, but I don't own a drum kit and I just want to get the sound. It sort of stops you from like doing the creative workflow and actually making music. Where like one time I actually got my Tracker Mini, and because it sort of acts like a contact microphone, like it'll pick up on sounds that it's like touched against, and I had a watering can, I gave it a good thud on the side, and that made a really cool kick drum. So just think of like the things that you have around it, like the sounds that you get, like low level sounds, high level sounds, like textures, like that's the sort of stuff that I really enjoy about being unconventional. Like there's sounds everywhere, and like I do want to do a bit more of a video where it's talking about like going out and capturing them, but the Tracker Mini, just with that little microphone, just makes it so much easier to like get out there and like capture the sounds like that. I will say at the end, you do want to do a bit of naming. So once you capture the sample, what you want to do is save and give it a good name, because if you got 100 files in there called recording 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll probably be later date being like, hey, what was recording 49? So, and yeah, we do have an auto name feature there. So definitely name it, and that is my tip number 2. Alright, we got the microphone going, we've gone out, we've gone caught a whole bunch of one shots, and we've saved it to the device, and now that we want to start making some really cool sounds. But you might notice that we might run into a bit of a roadblock because we only have 48 instruments that we can work with. So each instrument can hold a sample, so we could have 48 samples. And tip number 3 is really creating grouped samples together to create an instrument. So on here I've got a good little drum kit that I've built. So if I go into 3, you can see I have a whole bunch of samples ready to go. So I'm just going to go to the start, because if I play through the samples, got a snare, a clap, a hi-hat, an open hat. If we go down the end, I've got a whole bunch of like combo sounds, because this one instrument can handle doing all the drum sounds, as well as I can fit it all into one track on the channel. So I've got 8 or 7 tracks left to actually make my music with. And making these sort of files just means I only take up one spot in the instrument slot. So they're really handy, but I did build this one on the computer, so it's a bit of an issue, but we can create these using the microphone itself. So I've built one here. So what happened was I was in the garage and I had my stick and I had a whole bunch of stuff laying on the table, and I went through and just like hit each one, just waiting for like the sound to finish. I don't want to have like sounds bleeding together, but I created this full sample file here of a bunch of like one shot, and it just gives me a nice file to do some stuff with. So how you set one of these up, once you record all the sounds together, save it off as one file, and then you can either use Slice or Beat Slice. And each one's going to have a different thing to do it. So we'll start with Slice. So I'm just going here, and I'll just make something relatively quick. So I'm going to fill, we'll do Euclidean because Euclideans are fun. Say 27, chromatic, random, probably some range like that. If I hit fill, so the slice works by allowing you to change the pitch of the instrument by using the note. So if I play this, so it sounds interesting, but it's only that initial sample that we've done. So what we need to do for the slice tool is add a slice command. So I'm just going to do another fill, but I'm going to select it to each. Now I want to find that slice command, so it's somewhere around here. There we go. There's the slice command, and I'm just going to give it a random slice because I think I took about 20 hits when I saw that sample. I'm just going to fill that. So if I play, so now we've got a full random tune. We've got some pitch shifting, and this is really good for like textured elements and percussive elements. And like say you could have a few notes of your song, you could play that to melodically and change up the different notes as well. So it's a really good way to like do those sort of elements. but it does take up a channel. So this is where the beat slice comes in. So if we just head back over here, this one, and then we can change this to beat slice. And what this does is it's using that note command to change between the samples. So we don't actually need this line, so I can just delete that. And if we hit play, now it's probably going to play the top line because we need to reduce the volume between, I think it's C2 is when it starts. So if I start bringing down the notes, bring up the notes so it's in line with something else. And now it's using that note command to actually change the sample. So we don't have any sort of pitch modulation on there, but now we do have 2 effects channels to work with, and that's really handy for doing drums. So usually if I'm doing drums, I use beat slice. If I'm doing some texture elements or melodic elements, I'll use a normal slice. And say you got a sample that you know is like a loop of a music and you want to do even slice, you can come back in here, hold shift, and that's where the equal slice lives. So that's tip number 3. Alright, we're up to number 4 now, and this one's really just to make sure the samples that we record are going to work really nicely with the samples that we have. And if you've got some way to like record a sample that's at the correct pitch, go do that because it's going to save a lot of time. But this is a really good exercise to train your ears how to listen for tune. And so what we're going to do is I've captured a sample here, and I want to make sure that it lines up with this sound here. So if you've got a keyboard or something that you know has the correct pitch, you can play that note and then you can play the 2 samples together. So what I've done is I've got 2 FM sounds because I know they're going to sound horrible when they're out of tune, and just sort of visualizes in more sonic way that we can understand. So if I go in here, hit play, that's the sort of sound that we know that it's in tune. But if I bump this up one, we're going to hear that detune effect. And then what we're doing is, if I leave that running, we can go into the sample, see how it's starting to get close. And if we get close to that sound, we're going to hear them like sort of link up in phase. So if I come back into this one and I'm just going to drop it to a do. So it sounds like the do's a little bit high and I want to try and get it close. So if I do the same thing, come into here. Somewhere about there, and then I just know that with like the wavetables on here, they're pretty much on par with the right note. So then I can assume that this is close to that C5, and then I can save this and then I can use it everywhere else. So the way, because I just recorded like a simple little short sample, I did just add like a little ping pong just to make it a little bit better, but when I'm finished I can do that. So I know that's probably close to that tuning. And sometimes you do accidentally tune to a 4th or a 5th of the sound because they can sound harmoniously connected. But it's just a simple way to tune by ear on the Polyend Tracker. Alright, we're up to tip number 5, and this one's really cool for recording texture loops. So if you like to go outside and say record the rain or like traffic and that, this is a really cool way to add some sort of percussive or melodic elements using those loops. So what I've done is, because I live in Australia and it's nice and hot right now, I recorded the aircon going. So I have this sample here. And I just recorded it using the microphone on here and just gave it a normalize so I could get all the texture out of it I can. And what we can do is set this up so it continually loops for the duration of our sound. So I've got this set up here. So 1F, I'm working in hexadecimal, so I know that's 32. Just going to remember that for the time being, because I'm going to select the aircon, go into the editor, and I want to set the granular position for this one. So a little bit of setup. So what I'm going to do, LFO, triangle, probably a saw so it steps through. And I want to check that 32 steps. So I know we'll set that to 100. So it's going to go through that granular stage and walk through. So what we need to do is we're going to set the sample up now for granular. So I'm just going to go all the way down to the bottom. Now if I hit the preview, we will probably need to move the position about halfway across. So something like that. We'll bring that back down to 50% just to make sure that it's playing the whole cycle. And we could open up the gate a little bit more so we don't get as many clicks. So we have this looping audio and now it's synced with our music, so every time we play it's just going to continually loop through. But how do we make this into a percussive element? And that's where we need to realize that the instrument parameters aren't synced with each other. LFOs are always linked to the start of the song, so we know that when we hit play, that is just going to continually loop through every 32 steps. So what we can do is we can come up to the volume and we can create an envelope to create a percussive sound. So I'm just going to remove these two because we don't need it. But if I just add a little bit of delay, and then what I'm going to do is come back into this mode, go to note, shift, I'm just going to put in another Euclidean function because they're always fun, and chromatic, something about there, we'll see how that sounds. So if I just mute everything else, and then we can sort of take a little bit away. We'll probably make the Euclidean a little bit more crazy. So I've already done the Euclidean. I'm going to set it to note. Make it really good. And then say we add some roll commands to that. So we're going to fill, roll, random. Yeah, that'll. And that is just something really cool to do with like those looping texture samples that we collect. And really, like, this is just going out and like if you hear a sound that's just continually looping over, there could be some elements, like I do get dogs barking in the background every now and again. I try and cut all that out, but those things do add texture to these sort of loops, and it just creates something that's really interesting and very unique to like the tracker workflow, where we can create like loops of samples, but we can also have envelopes to do certain things. Like, we're not just limited to like just doing the volume, like we do have some other bits that we can work with, like the cutoff and that. We can have them as LFOs as well, so we can create these longer dynamic texture thingies. And I actually really enjoy this one, and really that was where I wanted to get to with this video. So that was number 5. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this one, because really I just wanted to show a few of the little things I enjoy about the tracker workflow, and also some of those little things that might not be as apparent but I think are really useful when you start getting into this type of workflow. So I really do enjoy the little microphone on this. It's definitely been a godsend to like just be out there and capturing samples when I'm out in a different space. And like with the OG tracker as well behind me, I have used a microphone connected to it to capture samples as well. And I think it's really important with like sampler workflows for you to create your own samples and test it out, because you're going to find samples that you use quite a lot, some that might not be as benefit, but they're all going to be good to like get that sort of creative juice flowing. So if you did like this one, definitely give it a thumbs up. It does tell the algorithm to point this to other people that are probably looking at the microphone on this thing and being like, hey, I would like to give that a shot. And also, if you have any comments or queries about what I've said today, definitely feel free to leave them down below. I do try and keep in touch with people and explain some of the concepts I did touch on in this video. And if you did enjoy this one, I do have a bunch of Polyend Tracker content on this channel, so if you want to stick around, I look forward to seeing you next time.